Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to learning alongside all of you. So I'm going to talk to you today about a study that I conducted as part of my dissertation research when I was a doctoral student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. This is a study about the awe experiences of professional scientists, as Jeff previewed, but I'm hopeful that the findings will have some resonance for you in the context of your own professions. So I will first share a little bit about what motivated this study. I'll summarize what I found, and I'll conclude with a few thoughts about how the findings might be relevant for this audience. So first, let me just tell you a little bit about who I am and my inspiration for conducting this study. I'm an educational researcher by training, and my expertise is in the science of learning and development, instructional design, and science education. And before I started my doctoral work, I was an elementary and middle school science teacher. And so I've always been really interested in the experiences that lead people to become engaged in science, and especially to see science as a valuable lens or tool for making sense of the world. And in my exploration of the existing literature on this subject, I came upon the research on awe, including work by many of the folks who are presenting in this symposium. And there were two things in particular that intrigued me about what I found in this research. First, I was interested in this idea that awe is typically triggered by an event that violates or disrupts our expectations, and that it makes us aware of gaps in our knowledge and drives the desire for additional information. This is, of course, important in the context of science, where we're often being asked to update or replace our existing understanding of how the world works in light of often surprising new evidence. And second, I was struck by the notion that experiences of awe seem to play a role in orienting us to the well-being of the collective. In fact, some of this research was conducted by those you'll be hearing from later today. As a science educator, I find it compelling to think that awe might be useful as a tool to help learners direct their attention toward their own role as participants within the vast, complex, and interconnected systems they're studying. However, much of the existing research in this area is quantitative and lab-based, which means that we have less work investigating the nature of awe experiences as they occur in the, quote, real world. And nor do we know a whole lot about how the individuals experiencing those moments of awe interpret them or make sense of their impact. So building on this prior research, I decided to go directly to the source and talk to some scientists. I designed a qualitative interview-based study that focuses on professional scientists' recollections of their own awe experiences in the context of their field of expertise. This study was guided by the following questions. First, how do scientists describe experiences of awe in the context of their work? And how do they connect these experiences to science as a discipline? And second, in what ways, if at all, do scientists see their awe experiences as impactful or transformative? So to answer these research questions, I conducted interviews with 30 professional scientists, most but not all in the United States, ranging from people who had earned their PhD as long ago as 1969 to as recently as 2018. And my analysis of the interview data led me to several big findings, three of which I'll share with you now, along with some quotes from the interviews that illustrate these findings. And I should note that all of the names you'll see here are pseudonyms. So the first key finding was that the participants in this study defined awe as having a deep association with the process of scientific discovery. So this relationship between awe and learning that has been suggested in the literature seems to ring true in their lived experiences. Their definitions and examples of awe in science were largely derived from new realizations, or what several of them referred to as aha moments. So as one participant, David, explained, awe is the feeling when you determine an undeniable truth. You learn these different things, they seem very unrelated, and then all of a sudden, everything just fits together. Some of these moments came from big conceptual understandings, like scientists who described being floored by learning about complex ideas like the genome or relativity for the first time. But notably, the examples that were top of mind for most participants and that seemed most powerful came from their own personal experiences of discovery. So as Sarah explained, there's a type of awe that comes from making discoveries that no one has known about before. For a very brief period of time, you're the only person who knows about them and who has ever known about them. She says, you know, I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize for my grad school thesis. It's not paradigm shattering or anything, but to know that I know what's happening and I'm the only person that does, to me, there is a feeling of awe that goes with that. And like Sarah, most participants did not attribute awe to the implications or the significance of their findings. Rather, they were awed by the discovery process itself. Another participant used the analogy of encountering a secret garden. Related to this, a second key finding was that participants' awe experiences were connected to their membership within the scientific community. In talking about their moments of discovery, participants recognized that their work was contributing to a larger body of knowledge, even if in a very small way. So even though many of these scientists valued the experience of briefly being the only person on Earth to know something, ultimately, they also derived awe from the opportunity to share their findings and participate in the broader scientific enterprise. Kyle described it as a social community of human beings that are in this together to figure out how the universe works. You're really rooting for people to figure things out. This feeling of community extended not just to their contemporaneous peers, but also to the long lineage of scientists who had come before them and who would come after them. So as Vivian explained, science obviously has a long history. Everyone who came before you, they saw the same thing and they thought it was mesmerizing what they saw. And so you kind of feel yourself in this long legacy of scientists going back. So even if their individual findings were small, scientists derived awe from the sense that they were collectively contributing to an endeavor that was bigger than themselves and actually spanned space and time. The last finding I want to talk about is how participants described the impact of their awe experiences. As a reminder, I went into this study interested in how awe might facilitate learning, and scientists did in fact say that their awe experiences were related to learning, as I previously discussed. For instance, many talked about cognitive shifts in perspective, and to a lesser extent, behavioral changes that came about as a result of their awe moments. But when it came to the significant impact of these experiences, what I heard resoundingly was that the main effect was related to motivation. In other words, experiences of awe in science are one of the reasons that scientists persist in their work. It's what keeps them coming back. A number of participants described awe as a source of fuel. As Sarah explained, having those experiences is what makes the work worthwhile. And critically, participants positioned these moments of awe as being in tension with the daily grind of their work as scientists. So there's a lot of text on this slide, but I just wanted to give you a sense of how many people talked about this idea of the challenges of science as an institution. So hopefully you can see this on your screens. I'll just pause for a few seconds so you can read a few of these quotes. So as you're hopefully starting to see, as many participants framed it, the work of being a scientist is quite difficult. The pay is awful, the hours are awful, a lot of the day-to-day work is actually quite tedious. And then there's all these institutional pressures to obtain funding and publish and get tenure. And so as Luke explained, that's the driver for a lot of what gets you through. You need those awe moments to propel the rest of it. There's so much drudgery that if you don't hang on to those moments, I don't know what else you hang on to. Or as Anna put it, awe, or at least that sense of discovery and kind of hoping for that awe, is sort of the only reason that you can survive in science. So obviously this study focused on a very specific population, so we need to be cautious about the kind of generalizations we make from these findings. But in my final minutes, I just want to pose 3 questions that I think might help us extend these findings beyond the field of science and that might be relevant for this audience in particular. First, there is certainly a particular kind of discovery process that is unique to the discipline of science, but the broader experience of discovery can happen in many different contexts. And I think we should try to seize these discovery moments wherever we might have them as opportunities for awe. So think about times in your personal or professional life where perhaps you were pursuing a burning question or where you were really driven by genuine curiosity rather than just going through the motions. If we can let ourselves be open to evidence that might be contradictory to our existing understandings, to be open-minded, as Jeff led with in the beginning of this session, and to embrace the way that this process is emotionally engaging rather than resist it, how might that shift our experience? Second, I think this relationship between awe and motivation is an important one, and one that can likely translate to any field where the days are long and the work is taxing. These scientists describe this sense of chasing moments of awe in their work, and that the hope for the next awe experience was a key component in motivating them to continue through hard times. But critically, they also talked about ways in which the institutional norms and constraints of science prevented them from experiencing awe as much as they'd like. And again, I think this has implications for those of us in other fields as well. How can we be more attuned to opportunities for awe so that we can use them as a source of motivation? And at the same time, particularly for those with some institutional power, what are the systemic barriers within our field that limit our access to awe experiences, and are those barriers disproportionately affecting certain populations within our field? For the scientists in my study, this included things like pressures to secure funding, to publish certain kinds of work, which prevented people from pursuing the kinds of riskier or more unconventional research that might be more likely to lead to moments of awe. So is there a parallel set of expectations or constraints in your field, and can anything be done about them? And finally, I was really struck by the ways that the participants in this study described themselves as being part of a vast community of scientists spanning the globe and stretching out over generations. Even for these experts who are at a level where their research is really making genuine contributions to the field, they talked about how their awe experiences came less from the implications of their individual results, more about how the work is contributing to the scientific enterprise writ large. So what does that mean in our own professional context? What is the broader endeavor to which we're contributing? What does impact mean when we think about it, not at the level of the individual, but at the level of the networks or systems that belong to? And can we derive a sense of awe from the perspective of being part of an international, intergenerational community? So I will leave it there. I'm really grateful for your time, and I look forward to your questions. I have my contact information on this final slide, and it's on the website as well, in case you'd like to continue the conversation further after today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Megan, for sharing that. And again, this is interactive as much as people allow it to be, and I hope everybody else was doing what I was doing is thinking about all the stuff that you said for my field or the different fields I work in. So thanks for sparking that interest in me. And I guess I'll speak for everybody else. Thanks for sparking that interest in all of us. Let's move next to another doctor, Dr. Virginia Sturm, who we already heard. Virginia, if you didn't notice, Docker mentioned you earlier. I'm not sure if you were around, and some of the other panelists, the great research that you're doing. And I think we're super fortunate to not just hear others talk about your work, but even better, they did a great job of it, but even better, we get to hear you talk about your really, really wonderful work and research on awe. So I will turn it over to you, Dr. Virginia Sturm. It's all yours.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. It's an amazing event. I'm going to be talking about a study that we did on awe. And this study was focused on older adults, but I just want to mention that I think the findings translate to all of us. And I also want to note that all the photographs that I'll be showing in the talk are photographs from participants in the study. So I study emotions, and I usually focus on older adults. And we know that as we age, sustained negative emotions, such as things like loneliness, are detrimental to not only our mental health, but also to our physical health. And things like loneliness increase as we get older. So above the age of 65, even up to a third or more of adults express feelings of loneliness. And people who are chronically lonely have different kinds of physical and mental health symptoms, including higher levels of depression and shorter lifespans. And positive emotions are important as we age because they can counteract these negative effects of negative emotions. And so in the field that I come from, as you have heard from earlier today, positive emotions are an important family of emotions. And we think that each of these emotions evolved and served a very specific function in our lives. So there's lots of different positive emotions. Obviously, today we're going to be focusing on awe, but in general, when we feel good and we feel positive, these emotions help us to approach others, to foster new relationships. They keep us connected to our friends and loved ones. And when we feel positive, we have more thoughts, we feel more creative, and also positive emotions are thought to help kind of restore our body back to a calm state after a negative emotional experience, such as stress or sadness or anger. And so we've heard a lot about awe, but I'll just briefly mention for those of you who might have missed it, that awe is one of these positive emotions that we can think about, and it arises in these very kind of specific contexts. Often people report awe in response to nature or art or religion, and it has to do with being in the presence of vast physical spaces or achievements of others. And when we feel awe, we have to kind of reconsider how we understand the world in order to take in this new information. And many studies of awe that you've heard about already and we'll hear about later have shown that awe helps us to feel more connected to others around us. We shift our attention outward and we feel more connected with this larger community, as Megan was just describing, this community of people around us. People are more generous and more humble when they feel awe. And there is this notion of the small self. So when we feel awe, because our attention is focused on this larger universe and world around us, we ourselves feel smaller in relation to that world and yet more connected. And that's what we really mean by that small self. So what we did, and this was in collaboration with Dacher Keltner, was, we really asked, well, could we do a simple intervention to foster experiences of awe in older adults in order to create more feelings of social connection, more feelings of those pro-social positive emotions. Those are things like compassion and gratitude, these positive emotions that, again, make us feel more connected to others in people's everyday lives. And so we developed a study, which I'll outline here. It was an 8-week study. We recruited a sample of older adults. The mean age was about age 75. They were very healthy adults, however. And we asked them to complete some surveys about themselves at the beginning and the end of the study. Then every single day of the study, we emailed them questions about their daily emotional experience. And one walk, they could do more, but we asked them to do at least one a week. And during the walk, after the walk, we asked them to complete some surveys about their experience during the walk. And we also asked them to take selfies during the walk. They took a picture before, during, and after their walks. They repeated these walks once a week for 8 weeks. And then we measured the change over time. So all of the participants in our study took a weekly walk. Half of the participants were randomized into what we called the awewalk condition, and they were given some extra instructions. They were told awe is a feeling that we have when we're in the presence of vast things that we don't immediately understand. Awe shifts our attention away from yourself, helps you to appreciate the wonders of the world around you. We asked them to tap into their childlike sense of wonder, and if they could, to go somewhere new. They didn't need to take a trip to the Grand Canyon or anything, but we asked them to try to explore new places. It could be in the city, it could be in the country, they could go wherever they wanted, and we wanted to make sure that it was not prescriptive to any one particular place. So we sent them off and we never saw these people again. We only contacted them via email, but they told us lots about their experiences during the study. Here's some of the results. So the two groups took very similar walks in a lot of ways. They walked about the same amount of time, the same speed. The beauty of their walks was about the same, the strenuousness. You can see the one difference here was that the people who took the control walks took more walks. That was kind of an unexpected finding, but the important part of it is to know that that worked against us because they should have increased they should have had lots of good advantages from taking more walks because we know exercise is beneficial to health. So anything we found in the awewalk group had to be above and beyond just general improvements because of exercise. And so we got back thousands of surveys and thousands of photographs from our participants across the study. And our first thing that we tested was to know just whether our manipulation worked. Did the participants in the awewalk group experience more awe? And we luckily found that they did. So this was just a check to make sure that our instructions had worked. We told them what awe was. We asked them to experience it. So this was just to make sure that the instructions did work. Participants also sent us not only some photographs, but about these leaves that they saw, the beautiful fall colors and the absence of them amidst the evergreen forest, thought about how the leaves were no longer crunchy underfoot because of the rain and how the walk was more spongy now, thought about the wonder that a small child feels as they explore their expanding world. So this is a beautiful quote. This person did a really great job. We give them an A+ on their awewalk. They were attending to their senses and the world around them, and they really understood the goals. And so, like we heard of before, feeling awe helps you to feel more connected and part of something larger than yourselves. And during the walks, you'll see these green lines in the awewalk group, and this is over time, kind of the increases that they reported in their surveys. The people who took awewalks did report increasing levels of feelings part of something larger than themselves during the walks, and they also felt part of something vast, in the presence of something vast, more over time. We also wanted to know whether that translated into their experience of the small self. So here what we did was we took their selfies and we traced the silhouette of each participant in the selfie, and we computed the percentage of each photograph that they filled with their own image versus the background image. And we wondered whether over time, if the people who took awewalks might fill up less of their photographs with their own image and literally concretely have a smaller self. We didn't know if this would work, but we gave it a shot, and we did find that over time, the participants who took awewalks filled less and less of their photographs with their own image and more with the background. So here's just an example of someone who took in the control walk group in week 1. You can see she's filling the photograph, same in week 8. And here's an example of someone from the awewalk group. In week 1, she filled the photograph, and in week 8, she was kind of shifting over to the side, making more space for this larger world and a smaller self for her. So during the awewalks, other emotions increased over time in addition to awe. So those pro-social positive emotions, compassion, gratitude, they also increased more over time, and also feelings of joy and happiness. People felt those during their walks, increasingly more over time when they were focusing on awe. We used the photographs again to measure this increased positive emotion with objective measures. So here we coded the intensity of the smile in their photographs. You can quantify how much the corners of the lips are pulling upward into a smile. And we wanted to know whether over time those who took awewalks had bigger smiles than those who took control walks. And again, the photographs did reveal this pattern, finding another line of evidence that the smiles were just kind of getting bigger over time in the people who took awewalks. Next, we moved to the surveys on the days outside of the walk. So these were those everyday surveys. So on these days, people probably didn't take an awewalk. We were looking for spillover effects. We wanted to know if just in their day-to-day lives, if participants were experiencing greater pro-social positive emotions. You can see again, we did find a spillover effect. So on days without walking, even people in the awewalk group reported greater compassion, admiration, gratitude over time. There was also some evidence that they had been decreasing negative emotions over time as well. On the day-to-day surveys, still the participants who took awewalks reported increasing feelings of, again, feeling part of something larger than themselves, feeling in the presence of vast things, and reported feelings of a small self in their day-to-day lives. One final thing that we did was to kind of ask whether there was a dose-like effect here. Does taking more walks yield greater benefits? And we did see some evidence that the people who kind of engaged in this intervention with more commitment and more passion did yield more benefits. So the more walks you took, there was this hint that there was greater gains if you took more walks over time. So in conclusion, we found that a very quick, simple intervention could increase awe. The whole intervention really took about 3 to 5 minutes. It's very cheap. It was very easy. It was really just a conversation about shifting outward, thinking of the details in your everyday life and the world around you, and not focusing inward on the self. Consistent with other theories of positive emotions, there's ideas that when you feel good, you experience more positive emotions, and there's this kind of spiral of well-being. And I think in general, our results kind of spoke to that kind of pattern. And I think in general, we can all work to increase awe in our day-to-day lives. And although the effects may be small, over time they can yield large benefits. And I'll just add on Instagram, if you follow #awewalk or awewalks, there are now thousands of photographs, which I look at every day, and they really brighten my day. So you can add your awewalks here from around the world. And all of the instructions are on my lab webpage if you'd like them. And I just like to thank all my collaborators at the Global Brain Health Institute and Dr. Keltner and Sarah Helly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Virginia. And let's dig a little bit deeper now from a slightly different perspective, but closely related, as we're going to turn over to our next doctor, Claire. And Claire is going to talk about awe and social attitudes and the effects on generosity and helping. And Claire, it is all yours. Take it away, please.
Prade. I come from France, and I'm a psychologist and a researcher at the University of Aix-Marseille in France. So today I will present to you some of my work that I made on the link between awe and prosociality. So as you probably know or have learned today, awe can be elicited by impressive natural landscape, by profound aesthetic experiences, or other stimuli perceived as vast or powerful. You can feel awe when you are watching the million of stars in the night sky, when you are listening to music, or when you think about ground theories. These stimuli have the particularity to be largely non-social. So in contrary, stimuli of other positive emotions, such as gratitude or compassion, are mainly social situations. You feel this kind of emotions when you interact with others. Consequently, the link between this emotion and prosocial behavior is quite salient. So the link between awe and prosociality was not so salient, but we hypothesized that there was a link, such a link, because awe come along with, as you probably noted in previous presentation, feelings of being small or insignificant in face of so vast and powerful stimuli. And our experiences seems to transcend the self, making individuals less focused on personal day-to-day concerns and more prone to feel oneness and connectedness with other human beings. So for all of these reasons, awe may have the power to help shifting from personal to social identity, thus promoting pro-group values and behaviors, especially prosociality. So prosociality is defined as voluntary action undertaken to benefit others, such as sharing, donating, caring, comforting, helping, and so on. So in 2 experiments that I will present, we tested the hypothesis that awe enhances prosocial attitudes, such as generosity and the willingness to help. As you will see, procedures were quite simple in the 2 experiments. So in the first one, young adults, actually there were 146 young adults that were recruited and randomly assigned to 1 of 3 emotional conditions, and they were asked to recall a particular event during which they felt either awe, amusement, or a neutral state. In the awe condition, participants recalled an event during which they felt awe in the presence of a stunning landscape. In the amusement condition, participants recalled an event during which they laughed with friends and so felt amusement. And in the neutral condition, participants were asked to describe the path they took to reach a low emotional place. Then we asked participants, what would you do if you won $100,000 or euros in Europe in a lottery game? Participants were invited to specify the expenditure they planned, as well as the percentage of money they would allocate for each expenditure. So participants reported various types of expenditures, such as doing shopping, making gifts to friends and families, investing money, donate to charity, buying a house, and so on. Then the percentage of money that people spontaneously allocated to others, to family, to friends, or to charity was thus coded as an implicit measure of generosity. And as you can see here, in the neutral condition, that is when participants did not report any particularly strong positive emotion, a bit less than 30% of money were allocated to others. When participants previously felt positive emotions, they plan to allocate a bit more to others. As you can see, participants in the awe condition were spontaneously prone to spend more than 40% of the money for the well-being of others. The difference between conditions is not huge, but it's consistent with what we expected. In conclusion of this first experiment, all were shown to enhance generosity. Then we aim to replicate and extend these findings in a second experiment. Here, participants were randomly assigned to 1 of 3 conditions again, and we elicited emotions through 3-minute video clips. Participants watched either a no eliciting video or a positive video, amused, that was chosen to amuse participants, or a neutral video. Then we measured the willingness to help. Participants were provided with 9 hypothetical everyday life situations, and in some of them, a protagonist was in need and asked for help. For each situation, participants wrote 2 lines regarding how they would react if they were faced in such situations. Then 2 judges who were blind to the conditions coded the answers as prosocial or not. So again, you can see that we found the same kind of results after having experienced awe. Participants were more prone to volunteer the time to help. In other words, awe enhances prosocial tendencies. As you might expect, the effect of awe on prosociality is moderated by individual differences. People especially differ in personality traits. We generally consider 5 big traits in personality as quite stable and universal: emotional stability, extraversion, openness, conscientiousness, and agreeableness. And personality affects altruism and prosociality in daily life. Agreeableness is a major determinant of prosociality. Individuals with high levels of agreeableness in the personality trait test have an optimistic view of human nature and get along well with others. They are usually warm, friendly, tactful, and in contrary, individuals who score low on agreeableness may put their own interest above those of others. They tend to be distant, unfriendly, and uncooperative. So since social harmony is an important goal for individuals that score high on agreeableness, these individuals are usually helpful and generous. What you can see on this graph is that highly agreeable people are no more prosocial in the awe condition than the other conditions. In other words, if you are highly agreeable, your emotional state will not really matter. You will almost always be willing to help. However, for people low in agreeableness, that is like mean people, awe may help them to be more prosocial. So in conclusion, our findings demonstrated that awe experiences increase prosocial attitudes such as spontaneous generosity and willingness to help. And an increasing number of researchers have recently devoted their attention to produce support for the social function of awe in improving pro-group behaviors. Awe, in comparison to appropriate control, was thus shown to promote the well-being of others through greater humility, ethical decision-making, prosocial values, and decrease in aggressiveness. So, awe brings feelings of connectedness with a greater desire to help others. This is of particular importance in the actual context of social distancing measures associated with the COVID pandemic. Experiencing awe and probably other self-transcendent emotions, such as gratitude, elevation, and hope, may help people to cope with loneliness and stress. Feeling of oneness and prosocial behaviors that come along with awe are indeed known to be linked to well-being, to life satisfaction, and to meaning in life. As it was already mentioned by previous presenters, you don't need to travel far away to experience awe. Activities of daily life, such as listening to music, can trigger awe. Music is actually often regarded as one of the main elicitors of awe. And this activity, listening to music, was recently reported in several studies to be one of the most efficient to counterbalance the stress inherent to the pandemic. So think of it, listen to awe-eliciting music and you probably feel good. Thank you for your attention.
Excellent, Claire. Thank you. We heard from our 3 awesome, incredible experts and researchers in awe. Now we're going to segue to our expert panelists to get some of their insights and perhaps ask a question as well. Let's start off with Dr. Jennifer Wild. And again, everybody, please look at the work that she's done. I won't have time to go into it, but I was interested in your personal perspective, but also with the great research and work that you've done in resilience with first responders over in the UK. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you to all the speakers, really wonderful presentations. It's not an area I've done a lot of research into, but I know that it can be the outcome of some of the tools that we're using to increase resilience. So I think that was really fascinating to hear. I wanted to pick up on Virginia, on your presentation. So you were saying that the awewalks help to increase smiling, they increase the sense of a small self. That's a good thing. And they can undo negative emotions. And it made me wonder if And we know that exercise is often a tool to help reduce depression or an early intervention for depression. But I wondered about the combination of walking and increasing the sense of awe as a tool to reduce depression, and wonder if you have any data on that.
Yeah, I mean, exercise is good for most things. So I definitely think exercise alone can have great benefits for mental health and things like depression or physical ailments, all sorts of things. And in our study, we made the control group a walking group, which was actually a really tight control because we could have had just a wait list, and then, you know, anything we would have done with the awewalk, it could have been due to a walk or to awe. So I was actually worried it was too too tight of a control, because to do something above and beyond exercise is quite hard. I don't think you have to have the walk to experience awe. I think we facilitated awe and other gains because we combined the two. And I think on their own, probably walking and awe are both great, and bringing them together probably had some kind of synergistic effect. That's my guess, although we haven't tested that exactly.
So do you think that the awewalk would help to undo low mood? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we were trying to see, really, was whether we could shift people's mood around. And I mean, in our sample, people were in their 70s and older. And so, shifting anything in that age group over 2 months, again, I was really not sure. I was in awe that we found anything, to be honest, because, we saw them in person, and then people's lives are complicated. They left, they have, everyday lives, and who knows what's going on. And so we had a lot of, there was not a lot of experimental control in that sense. But yeah, I do think it shifted mood. And I think, we just captured the first few weeks, but if you followed people over time and they continue to do it, I think if you stop doing awe walks, the benefits probably won't endure. But if you kept on with it as a practice, I do think that it's kind of an incremental accumulation of positive moments that can improve mood.
Brilliant. And I just had one more question for you. And I noticed that you had an urban group and a kind of rural group. And the urban group were encouraged to go to the top of a skyscraper, for example, and look out. And I wondered if there were any differences in the experience of awe between those two settings.
Yeah, so people could go wherever they wanted in the awe group. So they could go, those were just some examples, but they could go urban, they could go rural, and that was true for the control walk group too. And we did try to look to see if the awe walk and control walk groups went to different places, and they really didn't. They were seemingly in comparable places, like not one wasn't in the city and one wasn't in the country. Like everyone said it was beautiful, everyone said it was nice. But yeah, the main difference was the attention that the people had during the walks. I think that set them apart. I've seen some of the comments, people wrote horseback riding, and I've heard people have talked about awe swims, and it definitely doesn't have to be bike rides, a walk, but anything that gets you outside, I do think is helpful. But experiencing the world and helping you to just look outside and notice the wonder.
I think seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that is it, Jennifer, too. It's that idea of the bigger picture. And I think, Virginia, with your work, it's creating the opportunity for people to be open in their mind to experience the awe, and how it's so much overlapped with each of them. I want to bring in Dr. Jordan Feingold. And I know, Jordan, your background, you have the master's in the applied positive psychology from UPenn. And I don't know if you knew I was about to say this, but I have to congratulations, because you're also now a medical doctor as well, having recently congratulated. So congratulations, Dr. Feingold. It feels great saying that to you. I wanted to jump in, get your thoughts on anything, and if you have any questions for our researchers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff, and all of our speakers. It is an honor to be here. And Megan's talk evoked a lot in me as a recent learner and someone who's intimately involved in learning science. So my question for Megan is about the temporality and the duration of awe. In my experiences in medical school, I found myself constantly feeling like micro awe while I was in the classroom learning. And then that was quickly overshadowed by the stress and the, reckoning with the fact that I had to now regurgitate all of this information for an exam. So in my opinion and in my experience, I think the awe would have been much more potent if we had spaces and opportunities to really delve and talk about the awe with professors and colleagues. I'm wondering if any of that came up in your interviews with scientists, just about like how long it takes to really capitalize on that awe, if that came up in any of the interviews.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. This is obviously, as an educational researcher, something that I care a lot about, is how do we actually cultivate the conditions in learning environments for awe. And interestingly, the participants in this study described the interview experience as a sort of intervention, an opportunity for reflection. So if I had to do it again, I would have probably designed the study with a follow-up interview after they had that first interview, because even by the end of the hour that I spent with them, people were saying, oh, actually, now I'm thinking about this so much differently, having had this conversation with you. And so I wonder if, a week, a month later, if they were still thinking about it, if they were noticing the awe more and what they would have said. So I think that taking that time to reflect is a critical piece of it. And in another study that I conducted for my dissertation that was focused on adolescent science learners in actual summer science programs, there was more of that metacognitive, thinking about your thinking piece built into it. They were in instructional environments where educators were prompting them to reflect. But for they were younger, so in some ways they might not have been able to articulate their awe experiences quite as well, but I did see them doing more of that pausing and reflecting, but still I found that most of the reflecting on the awe experiences was about what does this mean for me and not what does this mean for the way I interact with the world. So they thought about, wow, I'm part of this global phenomenon, these scientific systems that I'm studying. I'm a participant in that, but they didn't extend that to say, so I'm going to change my behaviors to interact more kindly with my environment, to be a better ecological citizen, that kind of thing. And so I think even more explicit prompting for them to be able to transfer their understanding from that awe experience to the implications is necessary. And so I think building in that space for reflection and repeated reflection with some specific cueing of what does this mean for me? What does this mean for how I go about the world is really an important piece of it.
Really interesting. It's just making me think if we could be more explicit about inducing awe in our science learners and our medical students and our medical trainees, perhaps we would have more pro-social physicians and healthcare workers. And so really just linking your research with Claire is very fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jordan, I think it's sparking my interest too, especially you having just finished medical school, and we have with Jennifer, her work in first responders, and next we'll hear from Stephanie, mainly with her background in law enforcement and now helping law enforcement members with resilience in other areas. The way I look at it, it's not just doing it and not just creating those new mental schemas, right, that need for accommodation, but also I like to say, now what do you do with it? Great, now you have that new mental schema, what are you doing with it? And I'd like to take credit for the way the conversation is flowing to Stephanie next, but it's truly organic. It's sort of like, that's your work. It literally is your work. It's as far as the mental health and wellness, it's what do we do next? And I'd love to hear a bit of your thoughts on anything, and if you have any questions for our researchers. Stephanie?
Yeah, no, I'm all about the practical. I was very excited when I read Claire's article on awe and generosity, because I was like, I see so many implications for this, and the social importance of the research couldn't be more pronounced than it is right now, at a time when we have a lot of civil disturbance and a lot of divide, a lot of division among people. And so it's so important that we figure out what do we do with this? How do we cultivate awe so that we can increase the connection between people, and we can shift the perspectives of people, so that we can, even to her point, just increase ethical decision-making, reduce regressiveness, really kind of build those connections. I couldn't think of a better time than now to look at this or apply this research and figure out how do we increase the awe of first responders and of other people, healthcare workers, everyone else that might be feeling really stressed. And when we feel really stressed, kind of like the opposite of the broaden and build for Fredrickson, we actually narrow everything down, and our problem solving is narrowed down, and we start to become disconnected. So how do we in turn expand that? And so that's my question for you, Claire, is that, you know, how does the average person who might be stressed right now, who might be under a lot of pressure, they're not necessarily open or feeling very agreeable or curious or those kinds of things. How do we try to foster that curiosity, get them to be more open so that they can be open to awe experiences and the benefit that those offer? Big question.
Oh, thank you very much. So it's actually a big question, but some of the presenters during all the symposium from this morning have give some of answer of these questions. So you can enhance all experiences or increase the frequency of all experiences by with day-to-day activities such as listening to music, or walk, or inspiring videos, a lot of things that everybody can do. But there are also individual differences. Obviously, some people are more prone to feel awe. If you are more open to a new experience, you probably feel awe more often. And if you are more extrovert, you will experience more positive emotion. But sorry, I read at the same time in the commentary. So yes, there is a lot of things that we can do to increase hope, and we need to disconnect from day-to-day concerns. Recently there have been a study, not at all, but on beauty, showing that people cannot feel beauty in nature, for example, if they are always on their phone or on they are thinking about their work and day-to-day concerns. So first you need to go away from what you are always thinking about, and then you can feel awe and see the beauty around you, and maybe be more sensitive to this kind of things.
Okay.
I don't
so
know if I answer your question correctly, and if anybody have comment, feel free.
So it sounds like you're saying try to step out of maybe an everyday routine and start with small things like, okay, I'm going to go and do a walk, or I'm going to try to watch something or listen to something that creates some kind of shift. And that little shift might lead you incrementally, little by little, towards being more open and curious and having more experiences of awe because you have the smaller ones.
I think so. And I think studies that are made on that, that are preliminary studies, show quite the same things, but we need more studies about that to show that experience awe can make people more prone to search for new experiences of awe. And in some of my studies, actually in all of my studies, we found a link between awe and a little bit of sadness. So when people experience awe, they feel a bit of sadness. And when I asked people why they feel this kind of sadness, they answer, because awe is so rare and I want to experience it again. And when I experience awe, I know that suddenly it will be out, it will be finished, and I want to find it again. So I think people want to feel awe, but maybe don't know how to do, or maybe cannot do it because they are too deep inside their thinking.
Yeah. To jump in there, Claire, too, I wonder, and this is just general to everybody, not specifically, it's that idea of with some people when they experience awe and who's prone to awe more. So are those people that are more okay with ambiguity? And I can't help but then think, going down that rabbit hole, for people like what this symposium was geared towards, frontline workers, first responders that are so intent on being in charge and in control of everything. What happens when their life goes out of control, when they feel like they don't have control? So using this and resilience practices that all of you have also been involved in, it's that idea of, in the way I look at it, I'll throw it to just one of you in the interest of time. If anyone wants to jump in, whoever grabs it first, it's that idea, the way I look at it, it's, we can't constantly, just keep smacking them with resilience practices or, suicide prevention work constantly. The message gets dulled. And I truly think awe is one of those subtle ways to promote all that while also having a bit of fun as well. Does anybody want to comment on that? Whoever wants to go first, jump in. Go ahead, Jen.
I think awe takes you out of your head, doesn't it? And I think, being in our head, it keeps people ruminating and dwelling about the past or worrying about the future. And I know those are risk factors for depression and post-traumatic stress and first responders. So I think it's quite simple. It's quite a simple but very useful and very practical intervention with no stigma at all. And I think just going for a walk, just promoting that feeling of awe, it doesn't have to be a walk, it could be video, music, whatever, actually gets people out of their head, increases that sense of small self, increases smiling. And that's like an opposite action in terms of counteracting some of the repetitive negative thinking. So I think it's brilliant, and it's, I'm all for it.
All right, great. Virginia, I know you wanted to jump in.
Oh, I was just going to build on that and say, it's one thing, like we could have said, just go be more compassionate, just be more empathic. And that doesn't really work. So I think that's really what we were trying to do, is kind of go in the back door and increase awe. But really what we were looking for was this kind of spillover kind of pro-social effects. So I think it's exactly what you're saying. It's like a unstigmatized way to have these gains, but also have some fun while doing it, that can build over time. So I like that idea a lot, Jeff.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's not trickery either, or what I say, it's no Jedi mind tricks or anything. Like it's just, as I say with the program that I run, at very least, or very most, it's a couple minutes of a timeout that we all deserve. However, the ripple effect truly does go beyond us, as the studies we heard. That is